All right, my name is Samuel George, and this is part 2 of assignment 4 for Comp533. In this part, we're going to do basically a remote function and procedure call, show the workflow by calling increment and get value in the client, and show the inner workings of the client to show that wait for return value is called, and this in turn calls receive. We're going to show return value received is called, but doesn't do anything. We're going to show in the server that there's a handle procedure return, and then we're going to show the get value and handle procedure return basically do the same thing both client and server side, even though the procedure returns null. So let's just go ahead and start up a server here. So I went ahead and commented out the while loop for doing receives and stuff like that. We don't need all the notifications and stuff. We're just going to start a general server. So let's start this guy in debug mode. Okay, and I've got client 2 here. We're just going to show that two clients can be connected, and this loop's going to allow me to increment, print, receive, control. I'll also use some of this stuff for my speed test. Okay, so we're going to start client 2 in debug mode, and he's ready to go. Note for client 2, I've commented out all of the tracing, so we'll be able to see what it looks like when we just do a general print and increment, etc. For each of the clients. And then this one I do have tracing on. Okay, so we're going to start this guy in debug mode as well. And you can see we get all of the involved tracing. Okay, so let's go ahead and call. I've set it up so that we would be able to type increment in here, and this will do an increment. Okay, and you can see we're going to switch over to debug mode. Okay, so you can see my custom sent call completer has now called get value of remote procedure call. This method is going to do basically the same thing as the get value of return function call does, which is call basically print this and then wait for return value from the server. Okay. So now you can see we've called wait for return value in the client, and the server has woken up. It is already at this point has sent along the command that would like to be done, but we're going to see that we're going to call this receive here. Receive in turn is called here. This is going to get the client buffer and try to take from it. Here's the creation of the client buffer. We should see a print down here for that. So a queue was created for the client's use, and now the client thread is done. Okay, so we showed the server is now awake. So we've received a message. We should print client 1. We have a message from client 1 saying increment. Okay, this is going to put increment on the necessary queues and call increment. Okay, so here's our breakpoint and increment. So the server hits the breakpoint and increment, and we're going to show tracing the client to indicate that the sent call completer is blocked. That's what we just showed. So you can see client here is blocked. The client was created, and now he is waiting to queue, waiting for something on that queue. Okay, and we'll see that with the return of this increment, we will get the expected behavior. Okay, so we're going to call increment. Okay, this is going to call handle procedure return, which is going to call this reply possibly transform return method value. This is the same thing that the function return calls in the super, and I'll illustrate that when we do a print, except the arguments are null and null. So this is the handle procedure return. So this is show the overridden handle procedure return in the server. So here this is going to call basically the same function that the function return calls, which is going to return null. Okay, so as I've showed, this calls eventually reply transform value, and if everything's null, it's just going to create a return value for us and send that back. Okay. So our server is finished. It has responded with null and sent that back. So now we've received a message. It is going to put that message onto the client buffer. Okay. And that in turn, as you can see, as soon as we put that message onto the client buffer, then the receive woke up. This take worked. Okay. And the message was dequeued. Okay. So we'll see. We'll go ahead and let the receive notifier finish out, He's going to put it on the server buffers, but no one's going to use that. And let's go ahead and let him okay, I'll let him get that. That's fine. And here we are. Okay. So now we have the receive. The receive did a take. We are ready to receive the returned message. And in the sent call completer, we have also called return value received, which is empty. So this is in here. Show that return value received does not put the items in the queue. As we saw, this does not put the items in the queue. The queue was created and we put into the client 1 queue. Okay, a general client queue, and this was what's actually going to be used. Okay, so return value received is not put in the queue. Okay, so now the only thread that we have left with any work to do is the receive. We're going to show the workflow here. So receive does a take off the queue. It got the message off the queue, and it's going to print all the associated things with the message that it pulled off the queue. Okay, so it returned the value of null. Okay. Now let's do a get value and show that basically the process is the same. So I can do print, which will print the current value of the counter, which in turn is called get value. So you see this time we have called get value of remote function, which is basically just going to call this is in the super class get value of return function, and this is basically what was called in our remote value of remote procedure call. You can see we're going to wait for the return value. Okay, and then again in the client we will have a wait for receive that is going to wait for the return value. So this is to show tracing that the receive happens within the Gypsy framework. So this is wait for return value being called again. Okay, and we can see the last thing that the client is going to do is get the buffer. Okay, so now the client, both with get value and increment, both are blocked completely until the server responds. Okay, the server has received the message. The message is for the value, so it says counter needs to get value. Okay, it's going to put that onto both of the queues, and this is in turn going to call get value. Okay, so we're going to call get value in the server, and this is going to call the handle function return. Last time we called the handle procedure return, so I bookmarked here our super, and we'll see that the super method in turn calls reply possibly transformed, and then reply possibly transformed. Same exact thing as last time with the get procedure value or return handle procedure return, but this time we're handling function, and basically the same method is called. So this in turn finishes off the server, and the server has finished replying, and now the notifier has woken up. A message has come in. It says there's an RPC value of 1. That's what the counter currently sits at. That message is going to be put on the queue, just like last time. And this in turn is going to call return value received over in the sent call completer. And again, that's empty, as it should be. Return value received does not put any items into the queue. Those were done in the return value notifier. And we are ready to take. We have done our receive. We're ready to take off the queue. So we take off the queue. We got our return value back, and we printed 1 eventually. Okay. So this covers part 2. So we showed the server hit when we hit return value that the call completer was blocked using the wait for return value. That in turn showed the receive method being called. We then showed that return value received did not actually do anything, and that our override handle procedure return basically behaves the same way as handle function return, and that those were overridden to match, and that both block and both essentially function the same way synchronously. Okay, so that concludes part 2 of assignment 4.